Okay, this is the script for episode 9, Bust, from the series America, the Story of Us, and this is group 4 in the AM, and they are covering chapter 5 in the video, which is about Lewis and Schmeling. That's interesting. It's not scheduling, it's Schmeling. There we go. The rehearsal date, we're actually not going to be doing that. So the presentation date is going to be Thursday the 14th. The big idea of this group: politics and sports. The Lewis versus Schmeling boxing matches were not just about sports. Lewis represented the United States of America and Schmeling, Germany. Their rivalry reflected the politics between the two countries. As a result, we're going to talk about politics and sports. Politics have been used for sports, and sports have been used for politics ever since sports started. Sports have been used to both help or hurt diplomacy. Our group is going to explain about some specific examples based on real history. Okay, I'm a little confused about what Camilo is doing. It says insert here, and I don't see what he's doing. Okay. I guess Jin is doing the introduction. Hello everyone, I'm Jin. We're group 4 of episode 9. This is Alberto, Joanna, Maddie, Parvina, Rashida, Ibe, Zara, and me, Jin. Our topic is Lewis versus Schmeling. This was a boxing competition, but it was not just about the sports competition. Lewis represented the United States of America, and Schmeling represented Nazi Germany, and their rivalry reflected the tension and politics in that time leading up to World War II. In society, sports and politics have always been connected. Sports has been used for politics, and politics for sports. So we prepared some correlations between politics and sports to share with you. There are both pros and cons. The first pro is that sports can be a way to achieve diplomatic goals. For example, there was a diplomatic ping pong game between the United States and China in 1971. The two countries improved their relationship through the friendly match during the Cold War. Other advantages are that through sports, we can promote the unity and solidarity of the people and also enhance national prestige. And last, we can understand the international community to promote peace through sports. On the other hand, sports could be a cause of international conflict between hostile countries. For example, in 1969 there was a football match in El Salvador, and since we're in the United States, it was a soccer match. In 1969, there was a soccer match in El Salvador and Honduras that later expanded to a war. Governments sometimes use sports to try to distract the population away from politics, as the above example show us, examples. As the above example shows us, that doesn't always work out that way. Following our big idea of politics and sports, Zara is going to talk about depression. Okay? Not depression, but the Great Depression and sports. Okay. Zara is going to talk about the Great Depression and sports, Joanna about Jesse Owens, and Parvina, I'm pretty sure it's Jesse Owens, not Owen. Parvina is going to present the basketball match between the USA and the Soviet Union. eBay will explain the Munich Massacre. Alberto is going to talk about Nelson Mandela. Rashida will conclude our presentation, and Maddie is going to manage our Glogster. Now, let's welcome Zara and her topic, the Great Depression and sports. Thank you. Thank you, Jin. I'm Zara. The economic impact on sports during the Great Depression. The Great Depression devastated countries around the world, socially, culturally, and economically. The business of sports was not safe from the economic troubles of the Depression. The early years of the Depression were not easy for any sport, especially baseball and football. People loved to go to sport events. People loved to go to sporting events, but they had no jobs or their salaries were cut in half, so they could not afford to buy sport tickets. Before the Depression, many teams built new stadiums or renovated old ones. Tragically, from 1930 to 1933, many baseball teams lost 40% of their spectators. Baseball was not the only sport affected during those years. Football was also deeply hurt, especially during the last game of the season between the Boston Braves and Chicago Cardinals. Those sound like baseball teams. Please check. I would be willing to bet that these are baseball teams, not football teams. I'm 99.99% sure that these are not football teams. In an effort to boost ticket sales, the sport authorities decided to have Sunday games. This was an attempt to include blue-collar workers who could not attend the matches during the work week, but they also had special games where women were welcomed for free. Later, lights were added to stadiums to allow games to be played at night. So please check here. I'm sure this is a mistake and you really mean baseball, not football. It was the worst of times for the economy, but the best of times for two baseball legends, Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. The mention of their names attracted many to attend games to help distract Americans from their personal pain and suffering. And now, Joanna is going to talk about Jesse Owens. Thanks, Zara. I'm Joanna. I'm going to talk about one of the stories about sports and politics. For Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, the 1936 Berlin Olympic Games were expected to be a German showcase and a statement for Aryan supremacy. Adolf Hitler decided to use the games to show the world a resurgent Nazi Germany. He and other government officials had high hopes that German athletes would dominate the games with victories. But it was the African American participants who helped cement America's success at the Olympic Games. In all, the United States won 11 gold medals, 6 of them by black athletes. Owens was easily the most dominant athlete to compete. He captured 4 gold medals, the 100-meter, the long jump, the 200-meter, and the 400-meter relay, and broke 2 Olympic records along the way. Owens' record for the world broad jump would last 25 years until being broken by Olympian Irwin Robertson in 1960. After Owens won the 100-meter event, a furious Hitler stormed out of the stadium, though some reports indicate that Hitler later congratulated the athlete on his success. While Owens helped the U.S. triumph at the Games, his return home was not met with the kind of fanfare one might expect. President Franklin D. Roosevelt failed to meet with Owens and congratulate him, as was typical for champions. The athlete wouldn't be properly recognized until 1976, when President Gerald Ford awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The mild-mannered Owens seemed not the least surprised by his country's hypocrisy. When he went back to his native country, after all the stories about Hitler, he was still treated differently. He couldn't ride in the front of the bus and had to go in the back door. He couldn't live where he wanted, and he wasn't invited to the White House to shake hands with the president either. And now Parvina is going to talk about the Olympic men's basketball finals in 1972. Thanks, Joanna. Hi, I'm Parvina. September 10th, 1972. The Olympic men's basketball final. It was the Cold War time. An unbeaten U.S. team against the USSR. No American basketball team had ever lost an Olympic match. The Soviets were red, the U.S. team box fresh white. These were the 2 strongest countries in the world fighting for supremacy. The USSR, that started with the greater intent. What's that? That's strange. With the greater intent? Oh my. This is an odd sentence. I didn't see it before. The USSR started with the greater intent, and the Americans. I have no idea what that meant, so we're just going to take it out. With 6 minutes remaining, the Americans began finally to fast press and hustle. Down the gap came unevenly but surely until, with less than 10 seconds remaining, the Soviets led by just 1 point, 49-48, although they had possession. Alright, so how can I fix that sentence that needed to be there? Although the USA was favored, the USSR was actually ahead in the game. Favored means the USA was expected to win. Although the USA was favored, the USSR was actually ahead in the game. With 6 minutes remaining, the Americans began finally to fast press and hustle. Down the gap came unevenly but surely until, with less than 10 seconds remaining, the Soviets led by just 1 point, 49-48, although they had possession of the ball. Under enormous pressure, the Illinois State Guard sank both free throws, giving the Americans a 50-49 lead, their first of the game. The American supporters in the stands jumped joyously, repeatedly, almost victoriously. After the Soviets inbounded the ball a second time, the horn sounded, signaling an apparent American victory. Moments later, the teams were ordered back on the floor because the clock had not been properly reset to show 3 seconds remaining. Because of this mistake by the scorer's table, the celebrating Americans stood in disbelief when they were told they had not won anything yet. Alexander Belov became the hero. Rising between Americans, Jim Forbes and Ken Joyce, Belov caught a full-court pass and scored the winning layup as time ran out. The Soviets won the game by a single point. The controversy did not end with the game. Convinced they had been wronged, the U.S. team filed a formal protest with the International Basketball Federation. Everything progressed according to strictly Cold War politics, said Sports Illustrated writer Gary Smith. There were 3 Communist bloc judges. It's a 3-2 vote. America loses. The Soviet Union wins the gold medal, and at that point, the American players are facing a stark reality. And now eBay is going to talk about the Munich Massacre. Thanks, Parvina. Hi, I'm eBay. I'm going to talk about the Munich Massacre, which was a terrorist attack during the 1972 Olympic Games. During the 1972 Munich Olympic Games, in the early morning of September 5th, a group of Palestinian terrorists stormed the Olympic Village apartment of the Israeli athletes, killing 2 and taking 9 others hostage. The terrorists were part of a group known as Black September, representing a branch of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And they demanded 234 people be released from Israeli prisons, and 2 from a German prison, in return for the release of the hostages. The swift and decisive response from Israel was that there would be no negotiations. Munich police chief and the head of the Egyptian Olympic team negotiated directly with the kidnappers, offering them unlimited amounts of money. After negotiations to free the 9 Israelis broke down, the terrorists took the hostages to the Munich airport. Once there, German police opened fire from rooftops and killed 3 of the terrorists. A gun battle erupted and left the hostages, 2 more Palestinians, and a policeman dead. But the ordeal ended with the death of 9 hostages, 5 terrorists, and 1 German policeman. The Black September organization claimed responsibility for the killing of the 11 Israelis in Munich. The 1972 Olympic Games were suspended for 24 hours and a memorial service held for the members of the Israeli team. Following the massacre, the Israeli government organized a retaliation against Black September called Operation Wrath of God. And now, Alberto is going to talk about Nelson Mandela. Thanks, eBay. Hi everyone, I'm Alberto, and I'm going to talk about how Mandela used rugby to unite a divided country. Mandela was 27 years in prison because of his fight against apartheid in South Africa, and he was finally released in 1990. In 1994, Mandela was elected as president of South Africa, and one of his main concerns was the national reconciliation. I think it's better to take away the and to take away the capital. In 1994, Mandela was elected as president of South Africa, and one of his main concerns was national reconciliation. Between the black majority and the former ruling white minority. In 1994, Mandela was elected as president of South Africa, and one of his main concerns was national reconciliation between the black majority and the former ruling white minority. The next year was the Rugby World Cup, and South Africa was set to host this championship. For many blacks, especially the radicals, the national team, national doesn't always have to be capitalized unless it's a title of something. But nation is not capitalized, national is not capitalized. In fact, President of South Africa is also not. President would only be capitalized if you have the name of the president afterwards. South Africa is capitalized because it's the name of the country. If you said President Mandela, then you would capitalize the P. Same thing with national. Just because it's related to countries doesn't mean it's a reason that it should always be capitalized. For many blacks, especially the radicals, the national team, known as Springboks, symbolized white supremacy. Mandela tried to convince black people to support the national team. I'm confused. Is the name the national team? If it's the official name, then it should be capitalized. But if you're just saying it's a national team, then it should not be capitalized. So please investigate that. And if it's the actual name, it's capitalized. If you're just saying it's the team that represents the country, then it's not. Mandela tried to convince black people to support the national team because until then they were cheering for the rival team. Many of his supporters and fellow party members didn't like that. But he continued with this idea because he really believed that this was a first step not to get the national reconciliation. Because he really believed that this was a first step towards national reconciliation. At the end, although they were not the favorites to win the cup, they won the World Cup, and South Africa won as a more united country. Sometimes when there are big differences, we have to find the point of union. And in this case, the point of union is strange. Sometimes when there are big differences, we have to find a way to be united. And in this case, that was the national rugby team. That was the rugby. Okay. Thank you so much for your attention. And now Rashida is going to make our conclusion. Thanks, Alberto. Hi, I'm Rashida. Now, it's an old truth that sports and politics have had an intimate relationship. Sport history taught us that sports taught us. Okay. The history of sports has taught us or teaches us. The history of sports teaches us that sports has always been a target for political interests of various kinds. Through the examples that we saw together in our presentation, there is no doubt that sporting contests are a reflection of the real world, and that sports and politics influence one another directly or indirectly. Let's put it to a little vote. Today's world is changing and I hope you liked our presentation. I hope you liked our presentation. Now, let's wrap up with a little vote. Today's world is changing in more complex ways than before. Period. Do you think sports should be connected with politics more? Today's world is changing in more complex ways than before. Do you think sport should be connected with politics more or less than it has been before? Number one, yes, because number one, yes. Connecting them is good and can reduce tensions in the real world. 2, no. Mixing them together creates even more problems. 3, it does not matter. You will never be able to separate sports and politics. Thank you for your vote, everybody. And if you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand.